Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Lisa Kello, and in this video I will be answering the question, am I in a toxic relationship? Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe guys. Let's get to it. How to know if you're in a toxic relationship. I know this is a topic that goes through people's minds and also at some point in a relationship. And I just thought, why not shed some light into this, knowing that I have had quite some experience in this area. There's a lot of people out there, and also people that I personally know, that have a very strong personality. And then when they're in a relationship, you're like, how do you, with your very strong personality, not know that this person is not treating you right? Anyways, I was one of those people, to be honest. I effortlessly managed to find myself in 2 toxic relationships. Anyways, but this video is not about me. It's about the term toxic relationships. And what better way to start a video about toxic relationships than actually defining relationships? So I'll start with defining a toxic relationship, which I've written down the definitions, guys. So a toxic relationship is characterized by a continuous worsening or prolonged lack of trust, unresolved conflict, controlling behaviors, and frequent lying. Usually one person tends to carry the relationship and always compromises. And then an abusive relationship is characterized by causing harm that is emotional, financial, physical, or mental to another person consciously or unconsciously because they believe they have the right to control and restrict their partner's lives. And a bad relationship, guys, which is usually the case, is just basically unresolved minor problems here and there that occasionally build up and may seem impossible in the time, but if you both make the effort, would make the relationship work. So guys, in this video I'm going to talk about things to look out for that could indicate that you could possibly be in a toxic relationship. And the key word, guys, is indicate, which means it may not always be the case if you have these signs, but it could also possibly mean that you are likely in a toxic relationship. So the first things first is if you are willing to do more for the person than the person is willing to do for you. And what I mean is if you're putting in most of the effort, to the point where you know that if you put in exactly the same amount of effort in the relationship that your partner does, there will be absolutely no relationship whatsoever. You're always driving the conversations, you're always reaching out to the person, you're always compromising for the person, and it's usually dangerous when you start to compromise your values because the person makes you feel like they won't be with you otherwise, and sometimes they would even say it. The second thing is if the person is very much trying to control your social group, and they tend to pull you away from your friends and even worse, your family. They basically pick and choose who they want you to hang out with. And in some cases, they only want you to hang out with them and only them. And in situations like this, the person would tend to do this by actually making a fuss when you try to make new friends or you try to go out with your friends. But also if the person's always talking bad about your friends, especially people that you knew before you knew the person. I mean, it makes sense if they're talking bad about your friends and your friends are genuinely a bad influence of you and they don't actually bring out the best in you, then that actually makes sense. But if the reason that they talk bad about your friends has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you, that is toxic. The next thing is if fear is driving you to stay in the relationship and not love. And I definitely recommend take time to think, why are you in a relationship with this person? It could be because of the fear of losing the person, because you can't stand the thought of them being with another person. Is it because of the fear that there's no one better out there? Which honestly, there is. There always is better, guys. Or is it the fear of being alone? Or the fear of what would people think? Like, and especially if people have actually warned you about the person before and you're trying to like prove a point and you build up the fear of people will be like, well, we told you so. The one thing that I would say that God gave us is our conscience and our instinct, is that the signs will always be there. Honestly, the red flags are always there from the beginning. Anyways, the next thing is that would make you think, am I in a toxic relationship, is if you're afraid to express yourself because you're afraid of the consequences that it would have on your relationship. That is toxic. Sometimes because this may have even happened before, where you've tried to open up to the person and the person talked down on you, the person shouted at you, the person threatened to end the relationship, etc. Guys, that is some toxic behavior. And I'll give an example of myself. When I was in a relationship with this really toxic person, I remember that the person cheated on me and they cheated on me again. And then I opened up to this person and I was like, I'm really struggling with trust here because like, I feel like you've been dishonest to me. And this is the second time that you've actually been dishonest to me. And it's making it hard for me to trust you. And the first thing that the person turned around and said is, you are manipulative, you're vindictive, you're trying to bring this out so I feel worse about myself. And it wasn't like I was saying that to actually make the person feel worse about themselves. I was just expressing myself. Like, this is how I feel in this moment. So you need to watch out for these signs, guys, because that could indicate you are in a toxic relationship. Another thing that could indicate that you are in a toxic relationship is if the person tries to make you someone that you're not, especially if they met you that way. One thing that I am a firm believer of is that people are always changing. The person that you meet and the person that you marry are two completely different people. People mature throughout the relationship. Honestly, change is inevitable. One funny thing that I remember someone said is that we're not human beings, we are human becomings. We are always becoming a better version of ourselves. However, never make someone change you because of their judgment of you. And I don't mean like the clearly negative things about you, like, oh, you can be harsh sometimes, you can be selfish sometimes. I don't mean the correction out of love. I mean I hate how you dress, you're too skinny, you're too shy, you're too friendly, you need to be out there more. It's really not worth it, honestly. And that's usually a sign that you're just not the person for them. And that's when you start to see this manipulative behavior and this controlling behavior. Guys, nah, it's toxic. And that's even worse when they compare you to someone of the same sex and they say things like, you should be more like that person, you should dress more like that person, you should do more like how this person does it. Like, nah, mate, it's just not worth it. And the worst thing is if they compare you to their ex and they praise their ex for things that you're not doing. Guys, that's when you know it's your cute life. Because if they wanted someone like that, they could have looked elsewhere. They wouldn't have found that in you, and they could have asked the right questions when they started getting to know you. And the reason I'm pushing on things like this is because these things usually start small. It starts on the small things, and before you know it, like, this person is trying to make you a completely different person that you're not and that you're not comfortable with being. Anyways, moving on. So another thing is if they always try to turn things around and put it on you, where it's always your fault and it's never their fault. The arguments are always your fault. Every time you express yourself, you're trying to start an argument. Them cheating on you is your fault because you don't make time for them, you don't make them feel man or woman enough, and they shove their insecurities in your face. Like, guys, like, that is toxic. Anyways, the next thing is damaging statements, guys. Sometimes people don't tend to notice that these are damaging statements and they're deconditioning statements, and without knowing, you start to accept these things and it becomes toxic. And it's really powerful because you don't realize how the things that you hear and the things that you feed your ears, they can decondition your mind, they can change your perspective and how you view yourself. The first statement is, no one will ever love you or like you the way that I love you. Mate, I receive it. I pray it on my life. Thank you very much. I pray no one does that. Another one, sorry guys, I wrote it down. So it says, nobody likes a man or woman who does, and it's usually something that you do that pertains to you. And another one is like, no one will ever be with a woman or man who does this, that, and especially if it's things that are so unnecessary. And some of the dumb things that I personally have heard is like, no one would ever want to be with a woman that wants to wait until marriage, or no one would ever want to be with a woman that is too independent and earns more than a man, or no one would ever want to be with a woman that dresses the way that you do when you go out sometimes. Like, it's dumbass stuff like that that's like, mate, like, why are you with me then? And if you're constantly hearing things like that, like, it can kind of make you feel like, oh, maybe this is true, maybe there is some truth to this. Anyways guys, moving on. So the next one is constant unmet expectations in the relationship. Is when the person knows what makes you feel loved, what your love language is, what things that you don't like in a relationship, and they consistently do the opposite. Even worse, when the person sets these expectations and expects you to meet the expectations and makes such a big deal about it when they know that they don't even want to try to meet your expectations at all. And it puts you in a place where you become very unhappy. And before you know it, you start having these unresolved disputes, which 9 times out of 10, it does that unless you choose to compromise throughout the relationship. That usually means that you're probably with the wrong person, because it will put you in a place where you start to become someone that you're not to please someone that wasn't even made for you. Anyways, guys, so the next thing is, if you have more peace thinking about the fact that you are not going to be in a relationship with this person, or if you have more peace when you are not with the person than when you are with the person, because that can put you in a place where you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so unhappy, like what if I can be happier? And sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, like I don't see myself with this person, but I feel like I've given so much of myself to this person, so I might as well just stay and settle for this relationship. And another one that I notice a lot of people say is like, oh my gosh, but I'm gonna look like a failure if I walk away from this relationship. Honestly, your peace is better than the lack of peace staying with someone that was never made for you, because the longer you hold on to something that isn't yours, the longer you delay what literally is yours. Before you know it, like, you become so unhappy and discontent, if that's even a word, that you start to admire other people's relationships instead of focusing on how to build your relationship. But this may not always mean that you are actually in a toxic relationship, or you may be in a toxic relationship. It may just mean that you're with the wrong person. However, in some situations, they can become toxic, and the toxic person could possibly be you. So why do people choose to stay in toxic relationships? Whatever you expose yourself to, especially when you're in a vulnerable place, becomes normal. And when something becomes normal, it becomes comfortable. You start to see this toxic, rubbish situation as the best that life has to offer to you, especially if you've been in it for a significant period of time. And the most important thing to be very, very careful for, and that's why people normally tend to stay in toxic relationships, is if you have a dependent personality. Is if you can't go without a relationship, you don't like to be alone, and you always need company. It would predispose you to staying in a toxic relationship. And one thing to be wary of is people that jump in and out of relationships and change relationships like this. Guys, that is a massive red flag. And be very wary of people like that. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video about things to look out for that could indicate that you're in a toxic relationship. Please keep your eyes open, guys. If you want to see more content like this, please put it in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video.